the arid expanse of the desert, where life withers and hope falters, unfolds the story of Hagar and Ishmael, a tale etched with divine mercy and unwavering promises. Cast into the wilderness, a mother and her child stood on the brink of despair, their cries swallowed by the silent sands. Yet, in their frailty, heaven intervened, for God does not abandon his own. He opened their eyes to a wellspring of life, a reminder that his provision knows no bounds. This story whispers to the weary heart, when all seems lost, trust in the one who transforms desolation into miracles. Have you too sought refuge in God's promises, even when the path seemed barren? Stay with us as we uncover the lessons woven within this desert miracle and find hope in his unchanging faithfulness. In the ancient days, when the vast stretches of the Near East lay under the blazing sun, life was deeply entwined with customs and traditions that guided every household. Among these, the practice of polygamy was both accepted and woven into the fabric of society, a means to ensure lineage and survival. A woman's worth was often measured by her ability to bear children, and the barren woman faced not only personal anguish, but societal scorn. This was the plight of Sarah, the wife of Abraham, a woman of grace yet burdened by the silence of her womb. Sarah, though promised by God to be a mother of nations, had grown weary in waiting. The years passed, and the promise seemed like a distant echo, unfulfilled and perhaps forgotten. In her despair, she resolved to act within the boundaries of the customs of her day, choosing Hagar, her Egyptian servant, to serve as a surrogate. Hagar was young, and her status as a servant placed her entirely under Sarah's authority. Yet she, too, was a person with a story, a soul, and a quiet strength forged by years of servitude. Hagar's journey to Abraham's household had likely been fraught with difficulty. Taken from her homeland of Egypt, a land of towering pyramids and gods innumerable. In this foreign land, she had no family to protect her, no rights to uphold her dignity. Her life was dictated by the will of her mistress, Sarah, and the household she served. Yet Hagar was chosen for a role that would alter the course of her life and entwine her destiny with God's eternal promises. Sarah's plan was one of desperation rather than faith. She offered Hagar to Abraham that through her Sarah might obtain a child. The bond of marriage between Abraham and Hagar, though temporary in nature, made her more than a servant, yet not fully a wife. It was an arrangement born of human reasoning, an attempt to fulfill God's promise by human hands. Hagar conceived, and with the child growing within her, a quiet defiance rose in her heart. She, who had been a servant, now carried the seed of Abraham. This newfound status sowed discord in the household, a rift between mistress and servant. Sarah, seeing Hagar's change in demeanor, was grieved. She appealed to Abraham, placing the responsibility for the strife upon him. Abraham, in turn, gave Sarah permission to deal with Hagar as she saw fit. And so, Sarah afflicted Hagar, treating her harshly in her jealousy and sorrow. The tension in the household reached a breaking point, and Hagar fled into the wilderness, a place of desolation and danger. Alone and vulnerable, her future seemed uncertain, her child's fate precarious. Yet, in this moment of despair, the story takes a divine turn, as God's eyes were upon Hagar even in her distress. In the vast expanse of the wilderness, where the sun blazed unrelentingly and the sands stretched endlessly, Hagar wandered, her heart heavy with sorrow and fear. She had fled the pain of Sarah's harshness, seeking refuge but finding none. The wilderness, though a place of isolation, became the backdrop for an encounter so profound that it would alter Hagar's life forever. As Hagar rested by a spring of water on the road to Shur, a figure appeared to her. It was the angel of the Lord, a messenger of divine authority and presence, yet not just an angel. This was the manifestation of God himself, speaking words that pierced through the depths of Hagar's anguish. "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" the voice asked, not in condemnation but with a tenderness that acknowledged her pain. Trembling, Hagar answered, "I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai." In her response, she confessed the bitterness of her plight, the wounds of her heart, and the uncertainty of her future. Yet God, in his infinite mercy, did not rebuke her for her flight. Instead, he spoke words of assurance and promise. "Return to your mistress and submit to her," he said, a command that must have seemed unbearable at the moment. But with the command came a promise so great that it eclipsed her sorrow. "I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude." The angel of the Lord spoke further, revealing the destiny of the child she carried. "Behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen." Ishmael, meaning God hears, was a testament to the fact that even in the wilderness God had not turned a deaf ear to Hagar's cries. Overwhelmed by this encounter, Hagar responded with a declaration of faith and awe. She gave God a name, a rare and profound act in Scripture. "You are El Roi," she said, meaning the God who sees me. For in the wilderness, she had been seen by the Almighty not as a servant or an outcast, but as a person of worth and destiny. She marveled, saying, "Truly here I have seen him who looks after me." The spring where this encounter took place was named Bir Lahai Roi, meaning the well of the living one who sees me. It became a marker of God's faithfulness and his intimate care for the vulnerable. Hagar returned to Abraham and Sarah not as one defeated, but as one who had been touched by the divine, carrying within her the promise of a future secured by the hand of God. Thus, Hagar's story stands as a testimony to God's compassion and sovereignty. In her affliction, he saw her. In her flight, he found her. And in her return, he fulfilled his promise, proving that no one is beyond his reach and no situation too desperate for his grace. And in the fullness of time, Sarai, barren and weighed by years, considered the promise of the Lord that Abram would father nations. Yet her heart grew restless, for no child stirred within her. Thus she said unto Abram, "Behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. Go in unto my maid, it may be that I may obtain children by her." Abram, hearkening to Sarai's voice, took Hagar, her Egyptian maidservant, to wife after they had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. And Hagar conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her heart lifted in pride against Sarai, her mistress. Sarai, grieved and angered, spoke unto Abram, saying, "My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between me and thee." Abram, striving for peace, said unto Sarai, "Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee." Sarai dealt harshly with Hagar, and Hagar fled into the wilderness. But the angel of the Lord found Hagar by a fountain of water in the wilderness, on the way to Shur, and said unto her, Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence camest thou, and whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said unto her, Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself under her hands. I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. He will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And Hagar called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, Thou God seest me. For she said, Have I also here looked after him that seeth me? And she returned unto Sarai, and bore Abram a son. And Abram called his name Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old, when Hagar bare Ishmael unto him. Years passed, and the Lord appeared unto Abram again, and said, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me, and be thou perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. Abram fell on his face, and God spoke unto him, saying, As for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. And I will bless her, and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Abram laughed in his heart, saying, Shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear? And Abram said unto God, O that Ishmael might live before thee. But God said, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. Thus the promise was reaffirmed, and the tension within the household simmered as the time for Isaac's birth drew near. Ishmael, now a youth, walked in the shadow of his father's love, yet a rift began to form as the miraculous dawn of Isaac approached. The day came when the Lord fulfilled his word to Sarah, and she bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the set time God had spoken. Abraham called the name of his son Isaac, and on the 8th day, as commanded, circumcised him. The household rejoiced, and Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all who hear will laugh with me. Who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. Yet as Isaac grew, a shadow fell upon the joy of the household. During the weaning feast held in Isaac's honor, Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Hagar, mocking. Her heart burned with indignation, and she said unto Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. The words were grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son Ishmael. He wrestled in his heart, but the Lord said unto Abraham, Let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, and because of thy bondwoman. In all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice. For in Isaac shall thy seed be called. And also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. With sorrowful obedience, Abraham rose early in the morning, and took bread and a bottle of water, giving them to Hagar, placing them upon her shoulder with the child. He sent her away, And she departed, wandering in the wilderness of Beersheba. And when the water in the bottle was spent, Hagar cast the child under one of the shrubs. She went and sat down a good way off, as it were a bow shot. For she said, "Let me not see the death of the child." She lifted up her voice and wept. But God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven, saying, "What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation." And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the bottle, giving the lad drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness, and became an archer. He dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. Thus the Lord fulfilled his word, even in the midst of rejection and desolation, proving that his mercy and plans extend beyond human understanding. The desert wind carried the sharp cries of desperation as Hagar, weary and forlorn, stumbled through the barren wilderness. Her once strong arms now trembled as they supported the frail body of her son Ishmael, whose parched lips whispered no more. She could bear the sight of his suffering no longer. With a heart shattered by helplessness, Hagar laid her son beneath the sparse shade of a desert shrub, a feeble attempt to shield him from the unrelenting sun. Her footsteps faltered as she walked away, her tears mingling with the dry earth, her voice rising in a broken plea to the heavens. "Let me not see the death of the boy," she murmured, each word heavy with despair. She collapsed at a distance, her back to the lifeless form of her child, and wept bitterly. The wilderness seemed devoid of hope, yet even in her despair, her cries reached the ears of the Almighty. For the God who sees all had not turned his face away. At that moment, the stillness of the desert was pierced by the voice of an angel, a messenger of hope sent to a mother in her darkest hour. "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not fear, for God has heard the boy's voice where he is," the angel declared, his words resonating with divine authority. "Rise, lift the boy, and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Hagar's tear-streaked face turned toward the sound of the angel's voice, her heart caught between disbelief and hope. Slowly, as if carried by the strength of the divine promise, she rose and approached Ishmael. Her trembling hands reached out to the boy, and as she clasped him to her, the veil of despair began to lift. Suddenly, her eyes were opened, and before her, shimmering in the harsh light of the desert, stood a well of water. The life-giving spring seemed to flow not from the earth, but from the very hand of God himself, a testament to his providence. Hagar rushed to the well, her heart pounding with renewed strength, and filled a skin with water. She returned to Ishmael, pouring the cool, life-sustaining liquid over his cracked lips. His chest rose and fell as breath returned to his frail body, and Hagar marveled at the sight of her son revived. In that moment, Hagar knew with unwavering certainty that the God who had spoken to her once before was faithful to his word. The promise given in the wilderness years ago, that Ishmael would father a great nation, now felt as tangible as the water that restored her son. Though they had faced the harshness of the desert, God's faithfulness had met them there, bringing not just survival, but the assurance of his enduring plan. The desert, once a place of desolation, became a holy ground where divine intervention was etched into the sands. Hagar and Ishmael, their spirits uplifted, continued their journey, not as forsaken wanderers, but as recipients of a promise that transcended their trials. The well remained as a symbol of God's unyielding provision, a reminder that even in the wilderness, His love flows abundantly. Ishmael grew strong in the wilderness, his life shaped by the rugged landscapes and the trials he had endured. The boy who once lay lifeless beneath the desert shrub became a man of resilience and skill. With a bow in his hand, Ishmael roamed the untamed expanses, his arrows flying swift and true. He became known as a master archer, his prowess in the hunt providing sustenance for his people. The wilderness was not just his dwelling, but his teacher, forging in him a spirit unyielding and resourceful. As Ishmael matured, the promise spoken by the angel of the Lord began to unfold. He became the father of 12 sons, each destined to establish a tribe, and together they became the Ishmaelites, a people as numerous as the stars in the heavens. The tents of his descendants spread across the desert, their lives interwoven with trade, commerce, and the nomadic traditions that echoed their patriarch's own journey. These tribes carried with them the mark of God's blessing, their existence a testament to His ability to bring greatness from adversity. Through Ishmael, the threads of God's covenant extended further, weaving a tapestry of fulfillment and legacy. His descendants became a people of influence, their caravans traversing the ancient trade routes, their wealth and knowledge reaching far and wide. The Ishmaelites stood as a living witness to the divine promise spoken in the wilderness, that even those cast aside by man are never forgotten by God. The story of Ishmael's life is not just one of survival, but of triumph, a journey from despair to destiny. Though he was born into conflict and faced rejection, his legacy endured, shaping the history of nations. God's hand was evident in his lineage, proving that no circumstance is beyond the reach of divine redemption. In Ishmael's life, the faithfulness of God shines brightly. From the moment his mother wept in the wilderness to the flourishing of his descendants, every chapter of his story reflects a God who fulfills His promises. Ishmael's legacy is a beacon of hope for all who face the wilderness, a reminder that God's plans are steadfast, His promises sure, and His mercy unending. The desert has always been a place of testing and revelation, a sacred wilderness where the cries of the forsaken reach the heavens and divine intervention manifests. Hagar's journey through the desert is more than a tale of survival. It is a profound testament to God's unfailing attention to the cries of those society overlooks. The barren wasteland becomes the stage upon which God reveals His heart for the marginalized, His unwavering faithfulness, and His boundless mercy. Hagar, a servant by title but a child of God by creation, found herself cast into the wilderness with her son Ishmael. They were dismissed from the household of Abraham, wandering with a skin of water and a loaf of bread, with no promise of a future. This moment of despair, however, was the precise juncture where God's care and provision illuminated the truth of His character. Through Hagar's tears and Ishmael's cries, we witness a pivotal revelation. God is not blind to the suffering of the rejected. His angel appeared, addressing her by name, calling her not as a servant, but as a person known and loved by the Creator. "Fear not," the angel proclaimed, "for even in the desolation of the wilderness, God's provision was abundant. The well of water that saved Hagar and Ishmael serves as a tangible reminder that God provides for His children, even in the most desolate places of life." Hagar's story resonates across generations as a message of hope to all who feel forgotten or unseen. It speaks directly to those whose voices are drowned out by the noise of a world that prioritizes power and prestige. God sees them. He hears their cries. He answers in the most profound ways, often when all seems lost. This truth invites us to pause and reflect on the marginalized within our own lives and communities. How might we emulate God's compassion and become conduits of His care for those who are forgotten? The wilderness journey also teaches a lesson in faith. Hagar had every reason to despair. Her circumstances were bleak and her resources were meager. Yet, even in her hopelessness, she encountered the God who not only sees, but also acts. The story reminds us that faith is not the absence of despair, but the choice to trust in the midst of it. Hagar's encounter with the divine teaches us that even when we cannot see the way forward, God's path is already prepared. The well of water was always there. It took God's revelation to open her eyes. Moreover, Hagar's narrative illustrates a profound truth about purpose. Though she was a servant in Abraham's household, Hagar's journey reveals that she was more than her societal status. Her role in God's plan was unique and vital. Ishmael, her son, was destined to become a great nation, a promise given directly by God. This demonstrates that every individual, regardless of their origin or circumstances, has a purpose within God's divine plan. The trials Hagar faced were not without meaning. They were shaping her into a vessel for God's glory. This calls us to reflect deeply on the ways God sees and cares for the marginalized, how faith transforms despair, and how every life is imbued with divine purpose. Through Hagar's journey, we are reminded that even in the deserts of our own lives, God is present, providing, guiding, and calling us to trust in Him. The story of Hagar and Ishmael is a resounding testament to God's provision and faithfulness. In their moments of deepest despair, God showed up, transforming their wilderness into a place of hope. As we conclude this journey through Hagar's life, let us draw near to the well of lessons this story provides, finding hope for our own deserts. The overarching theme of this story is clear. God's faithfulness is unwavering, His provision is abundant, and His timing is perfect. When Hagar and Ishmael were on the brink of death, God revealed His care in a way that was both miraculous and personal. This same God is present in your life, attentive to your cries, and prepared to lead you to your own well of restoration. The invitation is to trust Him, even when the path ahead seems uncertain. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. Where do you feel unseen, hopeless, or rejected? Perhaps it is in a season of waiting, a struggle that feels insurmountable, or a place of deep loneliness. Like Hagar, you may feel as though you have been cast into the wilderness with no clear way forward. Yet, this is precisely where God's power is made perfect. It is in the desert that He speaks, that He provides, that He transforms. Hagar's journey challenges us to embrace faith even when the path is unclear. Trust in God's promises. Trust that He sees your tears and hears your cries. Trust that He is working behind the scenes, preparing a way where there seems to be no way. His promises are steadfast, and His provision is sure. Like Hagar, you are not alone. God is with you, and He will never forsake you. The story also calls us to extend compassion to others, particularly to those who are marginalized. Just as God cared for Hagar and Ishmael, we are invited to be His hands and feet, reaching out to those who feel forgotten. Who in your life is wandering in their own wilderness? how can you show them the love and care of the God who sees? Finally, the narrative of Hagar and Ishmael invites us to discover our purpose. Life's challenges, though difficult, are often the very tools God uses to shape us into who He has called us to be. Consider how God might be using your current circumstances to refine you, to prepare you for a greater role in His divine plan. The well of water in the wilderness was not just for survival. It was a symbol of God's ongoing presence and purpose in Hagar's life. What well might God be leading you to, even now? As we conclude, let this story inspire you to step forward in faith, to extend compassion to others, and to seek God's purpose in your life. Pray for guidance, ask for His provision, and trust in His timing. The God who met Hagar in the wilderness is the same God who walks with you today. He is faithful, He is present, and He is ready to lead you to your own well of hope and restoration. May you find strength in His promises, peace in His provision, and joy in discovering your purpose. Embrace the journey, trust in the God who sees, and let Him transform your desert into a place of abundance and renewal. For more uplifting messages and deeper insights into God's Word, subscribe to our channel, Remarkable Bible Stories, and continue this journey of faith with us. Let's walk together towards a life of purpose and abundance.